So this is Ed Ruscha's Royal Road Test from 1967. There's one in Philadelphia Airport. Okay, it looks like this. It looks like a kind of crappy domestic washing machine manual. It's got a very cheap spiral binding. You know, it's a funny old thing. And it's about this model Royal. And a Royal's kind of an iconic typewriter. And as I said, it's called Royal Road Test. Now, these instructions are really important, so I am going to test you on these later, okay? So if you can just make sure you take these in, all right? Sunday, August the 21st, 1966, 5:07 p.m. Don't worry about the whole of the place. Just get approximately, if you can just memorize, approximately 122 miles southwest of Las Vegas, Nevada. The weather, it was perfect. The speed was 90 miles per hour. Jason, how was the weather? Oh, thank you. And Stephen, whereabouts was it?
122 miles southwest of Vegas.
Fantastic. Perfect. This is the car they drove. It's a 1963 Buick LeSabre. It looks kind of cool now, but this would be just like an ordinary Ford nowadays. It wouldn't be anything special at that time back then. And this is the driver. This is Ed Ruscha. And this is the window from which the test was made. And this is the test area. It's actually known as the Devil's Playground. And if you get whacked by the mafia, I hope you don't, but if you do get whacked by the mafia, this is where they'll put you. There's nothing out there except scorpions, snakes, and I guess a few corpses. And what Ed did was he got his friend, the writer, the guy starring at the far end of the line, Mason Williams, a writer, to throw his Model Royal typewriter out of the car, travelling at a speed of... Yeah, and you can see, thank you, Ed's just hit the dent. He's pointing at the dent in the highway there at the bottom, and that's how far the wreckage went. Now, you could ask me, what is the point of this book? Because the rest of the book just shows documentation of the carnage, of the kind of skeleton, of the corpse. And I heard recently they didn't even intend to do this at first. They'd actually driven 2 miles down the road before they thought, hang on a minute, why don't we go back and photograph the wreckage? This is my favourite bit. It's a tab key stuck in a thistle bush, which is kind of cool. And this is the skeleton. They're pointing at the corpse of the Model Royal. Okay, so this is the book, Royal Road to the Unconscious, 2003. Again, it looks like, you know, some sort of crappy domestic washing machine manual. Well, sort of. It's got the same sort of spiral binding. And I guess I'm inspired by people like Sol LeWitt, and particularly his sentence number 5 from Sentences on Conceptual Art. Irrational thoughts should be followed absolutely and logically. So basically, if you have a mad idea, which I think Stephen was alluding to, follow it all the way through. So this is Sigmund Freud's interpretation of dreams. This was my psychoanalyst's copy, and he'd stuck a Big Daddy sticker over the penguin logo, Big Daddy from Sugar Puffs. Yeah. It's inspired, of course, because I was thinking, well, you know, if I'm going to do this project, how am I actually going to separate meaning? And, of course, I was inspired by Tristan Tzara and his famous use of the cut-up. So this actually happened in 1927 in Paris. He went into a theatre and he was doing a poetry performance, and he literally read words out randomly, one at a time. Physician. Something. Faust. But... dreams. Fathers. Upon. Where? Now, you guys were incredibly relaxed. In 1927, this was a big problem, a random poem, okay? Because people started shouting at Tristan Tzara, saying, you can't do this, you can't, you know, give us this crap poem that's just random. And friends of Tzara said, shut up, I want to listen to the poem. And then people who didn't like the poem picked up the seats of this theatre and whacked the other people on the head, and they were punching each other in the face. This really happened. The entire theatre turned into a massive riot, and it was destroyed. And as a result, Tristan Tzara was actually kicked out of the surrealist art movement. And William Burroughs famously said they left the cut-up grounded on the Freudian couch. There you go. So Sol LeWitt, I guess, provides me with the permission, and Tristan Tzara supplies the methodology. I'm far too lazy to cut up Freud myself, because there's a lot of it. This is a big book. And so I got my students to do it. It was a voluntary activity. I said, bring a pair of scissors, and if you want to come next week. And in exchange, they got a copy of the book, they got the name in the book, and they got as much champagne as they could drink at the opening reception. And it's kind of uncanny because 78 turned up and there were 780 pages. So they all got 10 each. Seemed to fit. And so they chop, like little worker bees. It was fantastic. Textile students were the best. They could do 10 pages of Freud in 3 hours flat. Some students had to take their words home as homework. Yeah. Okay, of course, we reference, William S. Burroughs and his fantastic thoughts about the magical potential of the cut-up and his friend Brian S. Gisson. But both Ivan Ward from the Freud Museum and Professor Craig Dworkin have found statements by Professor Freud that suggest possibly that he actually prefigured this idea in his own writing. He talks about the possibility it was indeed Freud himself who anticipated the cut-up as a process natural to human thought. So this is a bit of Freud from about, I think it's about 1889. And there's a bit more here. Chop, chop, chop. It took a long time. We couldn't use Las Vegas, Nevada. The Arts Council in England wouldn't support us to come all the way over here to your wonderful country. So we had to use a different marker to set off from. And so we used Freud's actual psychoanalytical couch. And I don't know how many of you know this, but Freud spent the last year of his life, 1938 to 39, in Hampstead in London. And he was very lucky to escape from the Nazis in Vienna. Both his sisters went to the gas chambers. And at the time, he was given a choice that he could leave with his family and all his possessions, but the Nazis said he'd have to pay a 30% tax on every one of his possessions. So if the hat was $10, he'd have to pay $3.33 to take the hat with him. Well, luckily for him, he had a friend called Marie Bonaparte who was very wealthy. She said, fine, we'll pay the lot. So he got out. He was very lucky to escape with his immediate family and all his possessions. And his son-in-law was an architect and built a beautiful museum in Hampstead called the Freud Museum, well worth a visit. I haven't completely wrecked it. And it's a wonderful place. And this is the famous couch that, his famous patients like Anna O, with a hand stuck in the air, and the Wolf Man, okay? They both lay on that couch and recounted their dreams to Professor Freud. So we started there, and we drove how far, Stephen?
122 miles. 90 miles per hour.
Yeah, about 122 miles, approximately 122 miles southwest of Freud's psychoanalytical couch, okay? And, of course, the weather was perfect, and we drove at a speed of 90 miles per hour. This is the car we use, which is a Renault Clio Sport. Va-va-voom. This is, I don't know if you guys have this on the States, this is like the national speed limit, which is 60 miles an hour, and I think it might be necessary to transcend the national speed limit in order to access the unconscious mind. This is the driver, this is the psychoanalyst, Dr. Howard Britton. This is the window from which the test was made. This is the test area, Redbridge Road, Crossways in Dorset, approximately 122 miles southwest of Professor Freud's psychoanalytical couch. This is the moment I released all 223,764 words from the window of the car, travelling at 90 miles per hour. And it's the funniest thing I've ever done. I can tell you I was laughing and crying simultaneously. I don't know what that means, but it was good. The art critic, Matthew Collins, said, I really think you ought to slow down. This was the photo that fantastic photographer Maurizio Cogliandro got. I call it my Gerhard Richter moment. And those are words, it's the only one I've ever had. Those are the words travelling at 90 miles an hour. And it made one hell of a mess. But I didn't want to be accused of littering the public highway, so of course I cleared up all the words. These are words that actually travelled at 90 miles an hour, and there's a bit of Dorset filth mixed in there as well. I have a leaf blower which also sucks, so I sucked up all the language. It took about 3 hours, because everything in the unconscious takes 3 hours. And then the psychoanalyst, what I asked him to do was I asked him to point, because you know if you're on a couch with a psychoanalyst, Freud's model was they used to sit behind you and the patient was in front. So the patient knows there's someone behind you. You know when someone's behind you. You can sense their presence even if you can't see them. So they're there, but they're not there. And he'd reach forward gently and just tap the patient on the forehead, and then you'd start to free associate. And often patients of psychoanalysis think that you have to think up a really good story when you go and see your analyst next time. Okay, what did I do at the weekend? Was it good? Can I share this with them? In actual fact, they don't listen to you. They listen to what's called the underbelly of speech. They listen to the pauses, the mistakes, the ums, the ahs, the breakages, the slippages. And so I thought it was much more appropriate that the psychoanalyst looked for interesting patterns in the reconfigured language. So I asked the photographers, 2 photographers, to act as ciphers of indifference and only to photograph whatever the psychoanalyst told them to photograph. And he also put the book together. I said, can you decide how you want the book organised and where you want the pictures to be? And he did floral words and he did road words as well. I felt this was my tap key moment, okay, tearing stuck in a thistle bush. The psychoanalyst said dreams aren't always pleasant, sometimes they end in nightmares, so sometimes it ends with fever and night terrors. And we cleaned everything up, as I said, collected all the language, and after 3 hours we found a packet of royals. After a bit of distance from the project, I can reduce it to this very simple equation. This book plus this book equals 223,704 words travelling at 90 miles an hour. I mean, if I was a bit cruder about it, I feel like the 2 books have made love, or to use Shakespeare's language in such a beautiful setting, we could say the beast with 2 backs. And my book is the unholy bastard offspring.